I welcome you all to the first public consultation on the national policy on sustainable special economic zones. Allow me first to give you a general background on the export processing zone regime that Namibia has experienced. The SSEZ regime was intended to attract investment, foreign investment, facilitate the import of foreign productive capital and technology, as well as transfer of technical and industrial skills to the local workforce, as well as contribute towards an increased share of Namibia's GDP. Similarly, there was a tax incentives for manufacturing of products in Namibia, which were introduced under the Income Tax Act to promote industrialization, manufacturing, value addition, and employment. The corporate tax rate under manufacturing regime was half to 18%, and most of the deductibles increased to about 25%. These export incentives lasted for a period of about 10 years. And the review of the SSEZ regime, as well as the manufacturing tax incentives, was undertaken. The review of the SSEZ regime concluded that the zero tax holiday did not yield the desired results and outcomes in terms of attracting investment and creation of new jobs. And in fact, it created a loss to government in revenue collection. The manufacturing tax incentive regime also did not achieve the anticipated growth and equally created a revenue loss. The European Union, as you may be aware, blacklisted Namibia as a non-cooperative jurisdiction for tax purposes. So to say, it was concluded that Namibia may be a tax haven. And to assess our tax system, the EU added additional criteria to the original set criteria, which made Namibia's SSEZ and manufacturing tax regime, which was referred to at the time as the free exporter regime by the EU, to be perceived as a harmful tax regime. The additional criteria set by the EU claims that Namibia under the SSEZ and manufacturing or exporter regime accorded advantage to non-residents and benefits are ring-fenced from the domestic markets. As such, these regimes were classified as harmful tax regime with a request to repeal possible grandfathering until 2022. The SSEZ regime will be phased out and replaced by the Sustainable Special Economic Zone regime, of which the Ministry of Industrialisation and Trade is now seeking for input today. The policy framework for the SSEZ model will set policy provisions that define the governance structure, applicable investment incentives, and guide the transition from SSEZ and manufacturing incentive regime to special economic zone incentives. The SSEZ regime will now assist us to strengthen the investment incentive policy function in Namibia. With this little background, with this information, I thank you all for coming, and I welcome you to this very constructive platform, and I wish you fruitful deliberations for the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director of Proceeding, Mr. Sam Katole. Allow me first and foremost to acknowledge the presence of Advocate Inge Zaamwani, who is a presidential advisor, who is also part of our spectrum in terms of the sectors, the industries that we're looking at. So she is the advisor that is assigned to the economic clusters of the ministries that are there to advance economic activities of this country. If I look at all of your faces, you are all familiar faces. Thus it becomes very difficult to acknowledge you one by one, because I think I know 95% of the faces that I'm seeing here, because we are from the same industry. And allow me to acknowledge you in lump sum, all of you various captains of industries. But allow me to introduce my team so that at a later stage, if you have questions and if you have clarification to seek, to at least know whom to ask, especially during the break and the interactions later on. I am accompanied here by a team that is led by Dr. Humavindu, who is the Deputy Executive Director responsible for industrial and enterprise development. Next to him is Ms. Ilona Kandi. Of course, she was here already, and she is the acting director in that same department. And I skip one, then I come to Ms. Dina Nashidengo, who is the director responsible for commerce, the one in the traditional attire. I can't say which tradition. Then I also then want to introduce, I think, Elijah. Where are you? Yes, you see what he does best. I think I have seen Mr. Kapenda, the Deputy Director for Trade Promotion, and then he is together with Mr. Patoko, who is also from the same department, that's now International Trade. And I have Solomon Katoli here, who is my right, is it the right or left end? So that is the team that is here with us this morning. I hope I did not omit anyone from the ministry. Oh, and lovely. The person that made it possible for us to be here, that's the Director of Administration, Mr. Penda Nawa. Sorry that I could not see you. You're sitting too far. And that is the team that is here with us this morning, because we have decided to come and have a conversation with you this morning. We are honored that you are here to participate in this workshop, and this workshop is dedicated to us to look at the policy, and that's the policy that we've been thinking for quite some time. And I'm delighted to see many of the faces that are from the industries that have been yearning for this policy to be drafted and finalized. And I see colleagues from the mining sector, from the manufacturing sector. I see colleagues from various spectrums, the medical and all kinds of professions that requires this policy to have been already crafted. So we are happy and delighted to hear from you, to have your inputs this morning. This is anchored in our Growth at Home strategy, as our aim at the end of the day is to grow the economy of this country and gradually to take us to the vision that we had dreamt many years ago. We are envisaging to make Namibia an industrialized nation come 2030. And these are baby steps that are preparing us to get there. Of course, you know we have this anchored in the Harambe Prosperity Plan, and of course in NDP 5, and it will transit as we are in the process of developing and crafting NDP 6. It will take center stage, and we are hopeful that by the time NDP 6 is to take off, that we have endorsed. As a country, we have said we want to have special economic zones, a structural transformation from the EPZ. As you may be aware, EPZ in terms of law is still in existence, but its operation has still ceased because of the challenges that we have experienced, challenges which I would not want to repeat here, but challenges that all of us are aware of. So up to until the time that we have SSEZ as a law that is enacted, and now that we are working on a policy, we only after then we will know that we will be better in terms of advancing our economic activities. As of now, and with the law that we have in place, it may not affect we have approved, because with the withdrawal of the EPZ regime left us hanging, and we were consulted, specifically those of you that are from the manufacturing sector. that I think 2 days back, the Parliament has passed an extension for the manufacturing incentives that I know, especially from the mining industry, have been hearing for. That the regime that have been in existence have been extended to up to such a time that we have completed this law. If we are to scan our microeconomic environment, where private enterprises need a conducive environment, what we are saying is that the environment in general is friendly, but it can reach its optimum if we are to have a regulatory framework that is responsive. We are saying now the private sector, as part of this consultation, should bring on board what you believe would enrich this document to become more relevant, to become more useful, and to become a policy that would assist us on ensuring that on the ground that we are developing this policy is quite fertile, and we are able to kickstart the development of employment creation and development of the various sectors as per the arrangement of the various zones that we are envisaging. There are many countries across the globe that have done so well in this specific arrangement. If we are to look at China as a shining example, there have been some success stories in terms of the developing special economic zones. Those of us that have gotten an opportunity to be in China, as you may be aware, each province in China is designated as its specific industrial capacity. And it goes further than that to say that certain industries, as per their classification, are based on the natural resources that are to be found in that specific province. And as such, this is what we're looking at, going forward, that we scan our country accordingly, and we rezone it according to its potential and its maximum potential. That is what we want to do with this policy. We have developed the framework, and it's a process, and it was a participatory process. From the government's side, it has been asked the Ministry of Industrialisation and Trade, together with the Ministry of Finance, the Namibia Development, NIPDB, Namibia Investment and Development Board, and then NIDA, of course, Namibia Industrial Development Agency, and many other stakeholders, ATF being one, and all our agencies, DIPA and the rest. We have worked together to develop the document, and we felt now that with NAMRA now that coming on board, we expected them also to be part of this system. So what we are saying is that now, from that experience, we felt it's necessary for us to have these consultations with you so that we get your input as well. We have been around in terms of extending an invitation for you to make inputs for the past month and a half. Then we felt there is a need still for us to have this platform, because it's one thing to have a written input, it's another thing to hear it from the horse's mouth. For we know if the inputs are explained and are deliberated on, they would be clear and be more meaningful to us to understand in terms of internalizing and see how we then incorporate them on the living document that we have. At the SACO and SADC level, Botswana and South Africa have already introduced special economic zones. They worked, and I'm disappointed to note that Botswana, at one platform, maybe in 2017 or so, when we met with them in one mission in Germany, they were still to start. And then by then we had already the ball rolling. They came and bypassed us and overtake. I think without giving us an indication, they just drove us. But here we are. They say, if you are late, it's better late than never. And we are hopeful that we will catch up with them. And as we're working on our document, we are also modeling ours to theirs, and we are comparing notes with them. Because the same applies to South Africa. And we hope that this whole process will enrich the document. At the end of the day, we will have a better improved document. Now, what do we wish to achieve with this special economic zone policy? Our aim is to induce a serious structural transformation of our economy. Because as of now, we have potentials and we have areas that have a potential that we do not really take on. And if I may give the latest example of the mooted plan and the all activities of green hydrogen and ammonia discussions and the pitching that we have been running through this all this time, I am now encouraged more than ever before that if we identify specific areas, as this specific one, we look at the location of the envisaged project in terms of the area where we would have all the necessary platforms that we would need as part of this project. When we talk of us having a wind plant, then we will have a desalination plant. All this can only be done because the location that we have identified is closer to the sea. So that is just one example. But if we are to look at many other, can it be in the sector of agriculture, can it be in any other sector of mining, or any other sector of pharmaceutical, for argument's sake, or meat industry, we know we have strategic locations where we need to have specific projects running. And this requires partnership. This whole process requires partnership going forward. And that partnership is partnership, public-private partnership. It can also be done from private sector to private sector. It can also then be done with us partnering with the expatriates that are outside the country. As we know, in many occasions we will strive with the funding, but if we are to look at the strategic partnership in terms of ensuring the implementation of this policy, we will yield the best results that we would require at the end of the day. And as we are also moving forward, I want us to look at the specific alignment of interests. As we sometimes just focus in our little corners, and we feel we are doing well on our own. Sometimes there is a requirement for us to have strategic alliance with all our other stakeholders, because it enriches the process for us to have ideas that are brought together, and sometimes it also saves in resources as we synergize if we are to work together and to look into various aspects of resources that we have, may it be human resources, may it be financial resources. We would have the board which we, at a later stage, and once the policy has been passed, we will now work on, and we would have some of you from various industries being part of this advisory board to assist us now to craft the way forward in terms of the implementation of this law. Because what we are aiming at is that when we craft the law, which we first start with the policy that we are working on today, which is at an advanced stage, and after these inputs, maybe we will just have one round of communication now as internal stakeholders. And by internal stakeholders, I'm referring to those that I have mentioned before, being part of the team as finance, NIPDB, NIDA, and the rest. And after that, we will then take the policy to through the normal process of going to cabinet, and then once it's approved, it becomes a working document and it can be enforceable. Post that, we will then continue to work on the law. And the good news I have to share with you is to say that we have already started some baby steps in the development of the law itself. From the ministerial perspective, it will be easy for us to roll out that process, because so much of what we have received through your inputs, not everything goes into a policy. So much of what we have received is to go into a law. And we are starting with the policy because that's the strategy and procedure of us crafting the regulatory framework. So we start with the policy, and then eventually we will graduate to the law. And we want to give you the assurance that by the first quarter of next year, as per the expectation of our annual plan, we will have start and kickstart the process of working on that law, so that we see it through by the end of next year. That so far, if the policy gets to kick off, definitely the whole spectrum will change, and it will assist us also then to level the playing field. Another notable piece of information that is worth of sharing with you is that in the course of this week, we were able to give notice in Parliament for tabling of the Namibia Investment Promotion and Facilitation Bill, which will be deliberated in the next 3 remaining weeks of Parliament. It's a long overdue law, which is complementary to the policy that we're working on. We look forward to your keen attention to those deliberations. And of course, the bill is a public document. It can be availed from the Attorney General.
This activity is a very important component of the prosperity plan, and we are very glad to see that progress is being made, and we are closer to the end of it. As you all know that in the Harambee Prosperity Plan, the economic recovery plan is based on being led by the private sector. And so we really look to you to see that this consultation process that has been opportunity given to us today is meaningfully employed, and that constructive proposals and recommendations are made into this very important framework, policy framework. I was also very glad to learn that the Investment Promotion and Facilitation Bill has been tabled in Parliament. You know, that has been long coming since 2016, and the reason why it has taken so long is because of the need for consultation with the private sector. So, based on the lessons learned, it is important that when we consult, we really consult, and we make all of our inputs. I am aware that not everybody is here, but the ministry is going to regional consultation after this, so most of the representatives will be given an opportunity to make an input into this very important policy framework. So I encourage you to make sure that you are very specific, so that we don't have to come back and say we omitted that, we should have included that. And also, I urge you to follow the debates in Parliament on that investment promotion and facilitation bill, because it's not only about foreign investment, but it's also about local investment. And to make sure that the environment is conducive for all of us, as government and the private sector, on the other hand, requires input from all of us. And I'm unable to join you for the remaining part of the day. I wish you luck, and I look forward to the output from this very important consultation. And while I'm here, I will come back through another platform to consult with the private sector, because in HPP there is another important aspect on the ESG, the importance of us in the private sector to adopt the ESG framework, and I'm glad that Steve is here, Steve Galloway is here. He worked with us in the formulation of our prosperity plan. We just came back from COP26, and this issue was very highlighted that going forward, if you are not compliant to the ESG as a private sector, it might become a requirement when you want to go and borrow money or get access to some of the available international facilities. So it is very important that we in Namibia are pretty much up to speed, and we comply voluntarily and make ourselves ready so that we are prepared for the future. We live in a global village, and we cannot isolate ourselves from the world. So best practices that are taking place in the world are equally important for us to comply. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister and Michael, for the opportunity. Thank you.
Had we gone forward and said, Namibia invites the manufacturing of electrical cars, because we want to be the leader, we want to learn how to do that, we want to be the leader of electrical transport, personal transport, mass transport, and goods transport, then that would have been a step forward. In terms of energy, everybody knows me for that subject. Why do we not have a policy that says by 2026, Namibia is going to be 100% renewable, electrified with storage? The COP26 consultation did not show what they should have shown, but they showed one thing. And that is that we not just can continue with some small changes. We have to change the very structure, the very approach of how we run an economy. And Namibia has two tremendous advantages. The one is we have not yet done the mistakes that the industrialized countries and China have done. And secondly, we have this abundant resources of bush, solar, wind, and ocean energy. So what I would like, and that's why I'm taking the word before we go in the groups, that we don't think about, oh, what about this formulation and this little thing, but that we think the big step forward. These zones should, for example, that is my personal opinion, should all have it as a condition that they are 100% renewable energized with storage, and that they contribute to the national grid and not take from the national grid. That's just one of my ideas. You may find your various areas. So I would just like you to consider, not now to be as we normally are hesitant, and I don't know what somebody thinks if I now say something which is maybe not completely in line. We often have these discussions, and you all know that feeling. I would like us to, since we are here and since we are requested to contribute with your vision, and not with correcting one or the other headline in one or the other presentation. Thank you for the opportunity.
And Honourable Minister, only one point we did discuss here, but I thought I wanted to raise it, but we ran out of time. I noticed from Michael that apparently your team was unable to define manufacturing. That's what Michael gave a feedback. And I'm proposing that I think that definition of manufacturing, it should be brought into the policy so that everybody knows what we're talking about. In that way, we shall be guided going forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malambo. Can we have next the services?
Thank you very much. We are going to do a presentation on our deliberation on the task. Question around services. My name is Franz. My colleagues Absalom and Lina. Lina, she's coming from the background of real estate. Absalom is coming from the background of consultation. Franz is an activist. So our approach basically, given the time constraint and the issue that we need to deliberate on, the first point that we looked at is to define what are we talking about when we talk of services. because there was reference to data, reference to filming, creative. But we thought of perhaps, as a Ministry of Industrialization, one of the things that the ministry should have, given our experience with COVID, the ministry should have a market unit. The idea is not to say a market unit, but the idea is for the ministry to have a body or an institution that see market trends. So we didn't know that COVID will come and we need somebody to produce coffee. We didn't know that COVID will come, we need somebody to produce masks and sanitizer. We didn't know about that, but it's a result of what happened in the market. And I think if you have this kind of market unit and an instrument that see what is happening in the market, it will help you. So we have our colleagues who are doing the wood carving, or newspaper vendors, or the colleagues who are selling in the street. We have to design a policy that looks at economic upliftment of their services or of their well-being. So when you have a market, you are able to cascade the need of a certain sector or a certain industry to a framework or to an institution. So we thought perhaps under the services component, we must submit an idea of having an institution that look into the market, because it's broader and it's more than that. So, and I think when it comes to the governance aspect, we thought of, for example, we have Namibian Estate Agent Board, but hearing from Lina input, because she's in the industry, the institution is more like registering those who want to join the industry. But when you look now in terms of the overall operation of the sort of the industry itself, they are not really much involved. So, and there are a lot of things happening in the market. One of the things that perhaps with the service unit, you are able to cascade, because you are microscoping at a certain scenario and you devise a certain resolution for that challenge. So we also thought of, for a long time, we have this issue around bureaucracy in the system, bureaucracy and duplication. Perhaps we should have, our phrasing is interministerial policy, but that's just for a recommendation. But a policy that enforces ministry, institution of government to work together, because it cannot be just left to, no, we will collaborate. There is no legal in an instrument that allow institution of the state to collaborate. So we thought perhaps to really deal with the issue of governance and duplication and harmonizing we must have a policy that enforces institutions of the government to work together. We were making a reference to, for instance, Ministry of Industrialization. It's our knowledge that they put up industrial park in the region. It's also our knowledge that Ministry of ICT, they put up infrastructure facility in the region. But it's not, it's like, for example, this is Zaamwani. The ministry put up an industrial park. The Ministry of ICT can put up a center for facility. But if you could harmonize those resources, you could do much greater in terms of reach out to those who doesn't have any center or any infrastructure. So I think there's a need for that type of collaboration, and we feel let's have a policy that regulates that kind of intervention. So on incentive, really, we thought it's an area that we don't want to go much, but the idea is this. When we tax institution or corporation, or when we tax, we felt perhaps as an incentive, this tax system, it needs to be restructured and tailor-made to certain institutions. If you tax, I'm a photographer. World Bank came to Namibia, they are having a workshop. They hire me to provide photograph service. And when they are going to pay me, that money comes from outside. So you pay what you pay through deduction, airtime, all those other things that you do. But the point is, we must have a very intelligent tax system that pays certain categories. If you just have an overall, there are a lot of loopholes in that. So we offer it as a general concern, but these are all ideas that need to be labored on, so that we see how far we can go together.
Yes, I don't represent the renewable industry, but just to add something, all of us, we have highlighted the cost of doing business in our country, and one of them is the utility cost, mostly electricity. So then the point is this is something that has been already highlighted. Let us, under the modified single buyer, I don't think we need to take another 10 years to increase the threshold beyond 30. So to the policymaker, I think that is something that we need to consider. Not another 10 years to increase the threshold from 30%. So let us move to 50% already within 2 or 3 years, according to the policy. So to reduce the utility cost.
We did the manufacturing. I think before I page over, I think just as a high-level summary, I think we want to say to the Minister that this new policy should ensure we create jobs. We all know the high unemployment rate that there is amongst our youth. So that's the first thing. Maybe the second thing is we've really got to talk mega investments here. Namibia has only got 2.5 million people, roundabout, and we should probably be looking at these investors that will manufacture or produce something that we will export in terms of the Africa Free Trade Agreement and AGOA and that type of thing. So that's what I think we should be looking at. We should be looking at really mega investors so they can create lots of jobs. So because I think the youth will become restless if we don't make sure that they've got jobs. So that's just as a start. So governance, I'm just going to take it maybe a bit back. On governance, we were saying, and I think it is already something that is in the policy, Dr. Humavindu, but we talked about specialized zones. So it's not just one area, but it could be any geographical area. The board, we were saying it should be a board that consists of somewhere between 6 to 10 members, not more than 10 members. The more people we have, the longer we get to make decisions. We think the composition should be 50-50 between government and the private sector. And the group thought that the chairman of the board must be from the private sector. So that was, then we were saying that we think that the board should be able to consult experts or specialists to make sure that they get the right guidelines. And we were also saying that there could be subcommittees on specific industries where those people know exactly what's going on in that particular industry, because you can't expect a group of 6 or 10 people to know everything about every industry. We also thought that the board should have a limited period, so every 3 years there must be a new board. And we also thought that there must be a body to monitor the board's activities. And we thought that the best people to do that is potentially the Namibian Manufacturing Association, the NCCI, and we probably I'm now thinking of the Chamber of Mines. But these industry bodies that are already there, that they should be able to consult with the board and give the board further, tell them how well they've done or where they've come short. So that was on that. We thought that the NSI, the Standards Institute, needs to be capacitated to make sure that we lift everyone in the country. And we also thought that the Namibia Anti-Competitions Commission should be capacitated to make sure that it's easier to do business. Just from the private sector perspective, we feel that the Anti-Competitions Commission has probably been a bit of a spoke in the wheel as from what it was supposed to create. Then we've got lots of incentives. The first one is, and I think I did say that at the start, but this whole objective must be that the jobs that are going to be created must be sustainable, long term. Weston, I'm happy to hear that you went for a 10% rate. We stuck to the 15% rate. But we do think that we've got to be competitive compared to the region. We are the highest tax rate between Botswana, South Africa, Mauritius. So we should have a competitive tax rate. In fact, I think if I've got lots of money to invest, my decision is going to be where's my investment the most securest, and where am I going to get the most return for my investment. And I don't think the general investor is so greedy that he wants everything. I don't think investors understand that there's a cost to doing business. So we've, and then we said maybe there should be a sunset clause on this lower rate. We said here 15 to 20 years. So that was that. It must be obviously available for local investors as well as foreign investors, so the same rules will apply to everyone. We believe that the incentives that are currently in the EPZ Act, apart from the 0% income tax, so we must just park that somewhere. But all the other incentives, the VAT incentive, the customs duty incentive, the transfer duty, all those incentives, we believe, must just go as it is into the SEZ policy. Just to make sure, we don't have to go and reinvent the wheel. We've already invented it. So, and I don't think the EU is going to be, or my information is, the EU is not going to be worried at all about those incentives. They were more worried about the 0% corporate rate.
How about the colleagues? Do we agree about the labor laws? The current EPZ ignore the labor laws. Are we going to continue ignoring the labor laws? Also, do we look at it? Good. I think that is something that we need to look at.
Very good question.
We need to look at it.
Okay. I'm just going to put it on here.
Yeah.
You can obviously keep this. If you can read my handwriting, I'm an accountant. Accountants are like doctors, they don't write neat. Fortunately, they've developed computers for it. So maintain the current fiscal incentives that are in the EPZ. Then we were saying there must be local, we must incentivize local procurement for these people that are coming to invest here by levying a tax on imports where local supplies are available. So if let's just take wood as an example. So if we've got wood locally and we want to import something to make, we want to import wood, we've got wood locally, then we think, apart from the customs duties or whatever that there is, there must be a further tax to disincentivize the manufacturer to import goods from outside. If we've got the natural resources locally, we must first use them. I know I'm between your lunch, but I won't be too long. We thought that there must be funding from, and we put GIPF in inverted commas, the DBN, to targeted activities to replace imports. So we think there's funding, there should be funding available from the GIPF. Lots of money is outside Namibia. We must get that money in, and we must say, if someone is replacing an activity for goods that we are importing, then those people must get special funding to make sure. And it's not that they get it for free, but the normal funding arrangement where you would pay it back over time. Then a fund for disaster incentives, also out of this money that is available. Typically, we heard there, we didn't anticipate where we are now, but we thought we will make it wider, a disaster incentive, to make sure current businesses and even those new businesses that are there, that they have some sort of help to carry on. Again, probably not for free, but at some point, because otherwise our GIPF pensioners will not have any money if we just keep on giving the money away, but some sort of thing to help people survive. And out of this, there must be then a mandate to allocate funds to SMEs and manufacturers, these guys that are in the SSEZ. Then the same point that I think that we talked about earlier is IPP generation. Take the 30% at least up to 50%, so that I, as the investor, can decide where am I going to get my power from. That I'm not forced to have it from the national utility. Reduce transfer duty rates to acquire land for these new investors. Special loans for land acquisition from the local authority or the government. There must be a time period for that to repay, and special interest rates. Reduce transport levy, training incentives from the NTA. The NTA, I understand, is sitting on a heap of money. Maybe they can help these people to skill up our labour force and incentivize skills transfer from the NTA. So if I, as the investor, am able to transfer skills to my employees, I should get a bigger incentive from the NTA than the current training levy that's available. And I think that's all.
In terms of administrative support. So you must look at this one-stop shop as not only the national one that we have with NIPDP and the ministry, but you should appreciate that there's a need within the SSEZ, each specific SSEZ, to have a one-stop shop administrative support for the operators. And then the developer can then leverage on the national platforms. I think that makes it very clear what we were intending with that. I appreciate the incentives packages, but I also think that what is coming out here is also induced within it is the performance agreement or measures, so that the minister does not in the end provide incentives package unduly, but also there should be an expectation in terms of what can the country expect in terms of the performance and sunset process, which is quite important. One issue that probably came through with the developers was on the, which I did not highlight in the speech, is that normally you have the SSEZ policy, then you have the SSEZ law, but then also in countries like, especially in Asia, we have specific rules. And I think what we'll also do is to ensure that those SSEZ rules are developed to ensure that there is surety and comfort, especially when it comes to the developers, so that there are no invariant approaches to how we are managing, especially the developers that are developing a specific SSEZ. Then there is the issue of pipeline creation, which was also tied to the performance agreement. I think it's quite a good one. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to develop a master plan, but I think what is quite critical is that the existing EP stakeholders are obviously catered for within the transitional period. But we did not think clearly of how do we ensure that we develop a pipeline now of those that are not EPZ, but that actually wants to develop SSEZ. So I think that is quite critical that we start now, Honorable Minister, to create a pipeline, and how do we then transition it. The example was given that the investment board can start having some form of agreements with some of these investors, and then as we finalize the laws and the rules, they are then able to quickly slot in. The definition of manufacturing is quite key, and I think obviously the ministry would see how to put it now within an act. Maybe there was a slight oversight back then in the EPZ that it was not fully accommodated for, and that led to all these things whereby the ministry was using the ISEC. But if you look at the definition of what manufacturer is in the Income Tax Act, that's where the disparities came through. But if you now have a law that is quite clear in terms of if you are going to get all these benefits, if you are defined as the, perhaps ISEC will continue, I don't know what will the decision be at the end of the day. The last one, which I will obviously leave to the Honourable Minister, is obviously on the written submission request. That will be the privilege for the Minister to see whether she will give you another additional week or two, I don't know. But we will be ready to make sure that we accommodate from our team, accommodate anything that comes through so that we can finalize the policy within time. With that said also, The final one is obviously on the interaction of the ministry's actions. It is good to see Dina is here, the Director for Commerce. Okay, she just left, but it's important to realize how important the other entities are on competition, as well as also on standards. And we'll ensure that those are well captured within the policy work and the law. Thank you, Minister.
I know it's way past lunchtime, and I know the families are worried, but I am going to just quickly run through some of the points and concerns that were raised that I feel NADO did not address, and most of them are those that have got to do with the ministry from other aspects and not necessarily the SSEZ that brought us here this morning. In terms of our achieving our goal for the day, I am comfortable and I am at peace that we have achieved that what brought us here. And that is to deliberate and to dissect this special economic zone and make valuable inputs that we have taken note of. And as you know, the team was assigned to be at each of your grouping, also to already then start jotting down what you were discussing, which of course we will compile and enrich the document that we already have. We have taken note of your proposals, specifically on the key 3 thematic points that we gave you. That was now a specific aspect of us looking at the law. How would it be, and how would it should be appealing? And we have also listened when you have improvised to look at us to look at other dimensions of consultation and benchmarking with all others that most probably were not in the either spectrum where we have benchmarked for with as of now. And we also take note of the fact that the agreements that are being proposed for the investors now going forward, and maybe as information sharing, and then Robert is here, who's representing NIPTP, in their 24-month strategic plan that was presented to Cabinet, there is a provision for that. And so that going forward, those investors would have to have an investment agreement so that we would have and track them, keep them accountable going forward. I think that is taken care of under that arrangement. Maybe there is something that I need to clarify here when it comes to the assembly plant in Wafish Bay. The assembly plant in Wafish Bay, the challenges that we have been encountering and the challenge that have been there is the issue of tax and the tax arrangement. I'm happy my sister from Namara is here. That has been the challenge. We set up the plan maybe before the policy framework was ready. But it's not to say that we set up an institute or an establishment that does not respond to what we have here. In the first place, we had no manufacturing license before we started manufacturing. That now we have, though we have done it later when the plant was already up and running. Secondly, we had no policy, that automotive development policy, which we have now domesticated from the SAP one, which will now give us the room to be able to export those Peugeot cars and vehicles to South Africa. Our target market was never here. Our target market was South Africa, but because of those impediments in terms of the tax, the same tax and the same incentives that we are discussing here today, that has been the challenge. And as I said, now we have now domesticated the policy, and we have now reached a consensus in terms of us ensuring the export of those vehicles. And as it's now, between us and the Ministry of Finance, there is a training ongoing in Namara. for them to be able to calculate the rebates for that tax, because as you may know, what pushed the cost price up was because of the tax regime that was between 18 and 25%. That has been the challenge of the plan, but we are about to overcome that. Otherwise, it's not to say that we did not have the authority to manufacture and assemble those vehicles. That is universal, but you would need the institutional that would now facilitate. But the one that the ministry has is the one that interface everybody else. NIPDP, BIPA, Ministry of Finance, Social Security, the local authorities, and everybody who is involved in the process of doing business. And so far, we have already interfaced the Ministry, I think, for Home Affairs and Social Security. We are struggling with finance because of the compatibility of the systems. BIPA is coming on board, just that they had their own outdated system. They are currently working on theirs, internal, the domestic one, but that is the idea. And then you would have now the one-stop shop now for specific clients. NIPDB, we had, for you that have been following in the past years, that what we used to call NAMIP zone, that was the targeting the investors. We want to reactivate that through NIPDB so that the investors can still come through that one and interface on the main one. I think that's what we are saying, and that has been clarified. Then incentives, proposals, as we have given them in specific categories, that is the way forward. The way forward, the mining industry is going to have its own package. The manufacturing category is going to have its own package, so that we don't lump you together when we know that in terms of activities and in terms of the returns, you are not at the same level. So the incentives are now categorized in various categories, and I am sure the proposals are going to be compatible to the sector. And that is what the Ministry of Finance is working on. Of course, it's part of the framework in general, but the incentives is a component that is dealt more by the Ministry of Finance, and we are working together on that. That is the arrangement as of now. It's just maybe to look and to review the percentage in terms of amount as you have proposed. Some of you 10%, some to remain at 15%, some want it lower than that. So we'll see, and we will harmonize and see what is workable, while we also then benchmark with all others outside. The colleague from the services, the feedback was now for developers and natural resources. If I move to services, of course, then the definition of manufacturing we take note, and the concentration on us migrating and starting paying more attention and focusing on renewable energy. I think that is a tall order that we all know. The earlier on, I think, during my statement, opening statement, I have made the reference of our efforts in energy to be diverted into renewable energy. These green hydrogens that we're talking about, in ammonia, and all these other sources of renewable energy that we're working on, is for us to upscale the production capacity. As of now, we know we are halfway there, because half of what we consume, we import. And the reality of our energy needs going forward is that we need to start focusing and paying more attention on energy generation. The independent power producers, a new concept that is aiding this whole process, but let us all, from our various corners in terms of the sectors, focus on energy generation, because that's the only way we can sustain the industries. Because all the industries that we are yearning for can only be sustained and can only be workable if we are able to be compatible in terms of energy supply. And as I think it's Mr. Marango or somebody had indicated that the more we import the energy, the expensive it remains. If we are to find other mechanisms of generating our own energy, I am sure it's going to be better for all of us. Somebody talked about the market trends, the studying of market trends. Yeah, of course, right, COVID has found us all, caught us off all of that. We were all just living happily and not expecting any challenge, but we have drawn lessons from COVID. And before that, it's just the assurance to say that the Namibia Trade Forum, the core mandate of that institution to look at those market trends and to study the market developments. Yes, Robert is agreeing with me. He moved from there to NIPTP. So they have done justice to that. Even during COVID, these were the people that have assisted us to come up with trading apps, like they developed the Tambula of this time to be able to have the horticulture producers find a market. Yeah, I think, and also looking at what do we need and the diversification in general. The institution we have, and these are the people that are assisting us to domesticate the local product. They run the campaign of Buy Namibia, Buy Local, Grow Namibia, which have been successful. We started it as an experiment, but we were delighted now to note that it have to reach us to a point of where, as it now, you have the food lovers of this world and all others as we want to mainstream all the sectors, sourcing like 80% of their fresh produce from the local producers. And of course, we bring on board their institutions like you say, NSI and the rest for certification, for training our people to be able to meet the standards. So we are getting there. It could be a slow process, but we are getting there. The Namibia Estate Agent Board, somebody has mentioned it. We are working on a new law. I just came back from the roadshow that we are undertaking to educate the estate agents. By the way, the new law is going to bring everybody on board. Now it's estate agents only. We are bringing in the auctioneers, the property managers, and we are now going in the regions to educate before the law is passed, which we believe will take immediately February next year when the parliament opens. And we want those inputs, like the ones you are bringing, to come on board before we work on the regulation of this law. Yeah, like you have availed yourself, of course we will get in touch with you. And the harmonization, the duplication, the cohesion from the government institutions, I think that's what we are aiming at. And that's why you see, like I said, when we develop this policy from the internal stakeholders perspective, we sit together with the team that you see here. Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Industrialisation, of course, and NIPTP, BIPA, and all the relevant stakeholders, so that we ensure that cohesion and to run away from the duplication. I think it has not been so easy in the past, but I think we are really trying to get there. The proposal on increasing the threshold to 50% is noted, and we will also have to discuss with the relevant industry. We will be guided by the Ministry of Mines and Energy on that specific one, but we have taken note. I don't think Michael has reacted to that. Just giving you that assurance and the storage capacity. I think all this we would have to take note of and have to deliberate with the relevant sector. Yes, the last one, that was the manufacturing category. We take note of all your proposals on the board, and we also take note of the proposals from the area categories in terms of the nature of the board, whether it should be advisory or it should be institutional. I think all this we have taken note of, and all other aspects of the proposals in terms of the composition and the term and all this that we have proposed. And the proposal also on who should oversee this, we have taken note. I think that is for us to deliberate further, for it has to be housed somewhere under the established government institutions, like you said, whether it's NCCI everybody else, we are going to look at that. Going forward, I think we would have to make the decision. And I think there was an input from us to take consideration of the labor law. Labor law has been part of the EPZ in general. It's just that there are those industries that opted to push it aside. Tax on import of products available, we take note of that. And to subsidize the local procurement, I think that is a very, very good one to take note of. And the disaster incentives fund, yeah, I think we have taken note of that, but we would welcome your proposal on where we resource those funds. Because as I said, now it's good to establish a fund, and we all know there is a need for such a fund, but we would expect your advice going forward on the sources of that fund. Where do we source maybe some levy or some kind of contribution? I think we need to be guided on that. As to making use of or tapping into the LTA levy, I think those are discussions that also can be taken up with the relevant sector, and take note of that. The anti-dumping rule, I said now, you know, we are working on the International Trade Management Bill, and that component is part of that. We have already gone past the stage of CCL, which is Cabinet Committee on Legislation, this bill, and there were some comments that we were given to go and work on before we take it back to CCL. But that component is featuring prominently in that specific legislation, and then I know we will have a review from that. As per the request of our extension, on Monday we will have a similar platform for the course, and still maybe, I am underlining, maybe would extend you with only 1 week up to this coming Friday. Whoever really has a pressing need for a written submission, or maybe to modify your submission after this platform, I believe we can accommodate you up to the coming Friday, which is the 26th of this month, because like Michael is indicating, we are close to the end of the year. We also need to report. We have reporting authorities above us that have given us timelines, and for us to stick to these timelines, let's ensure that these inputs are done on time. And let me take this opportunity to really appreciate you, especially those of you that could sit up to this hour. I know you see the value of your being here, because this is what will make this document. This document is ours. The ministry only have a responsibility and a mandate to craft it, but we are crafting it for the industries, and the industries are you who are gathered here this morning, or rather this afternoon. And if you are not here to make them workable for you, we will give you what we feel is necessary for us to give you without your participation. But with your participation, we will give you a document that is workable, the special economic zone policy that will assist us to grow the economy of this country, that will assist us to achieve our dream and the vision of industrialization, which we have set for ourselves, that by the year 2030, we want Namibia to be an industrialized nation. And as we count, the clock is ticking, 9 years, we might look like few, but there is so much that we can do in those 9 years. I think step by step, and if we work together, by 2030 we would have achieved at the level of that we could. It might not be 100%, but with encouragement of the participation such as this one, we are hopeful that we are going to get there. Let me take this opportunity to wish you a very good and beautiful weekend. and restful weekend, so that by next week you are refreshed to amplify, and to review and modify and polish your new submissions that you're going to give to us. Thank you, and have a great day later.